Welcome back, everyone! If you're someone who loves cutting straight to the heart of complex ideas, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're diving into an incredibly profound Buddhist text called the Yogacara Bhumi Sastra. Now, I know, ancient texts can sound super intimidating, right? Especially if you're just starting out. But don't worry, we're doing this explainer strictly from a beginner's perspective, focusing on the real, actionable essentials of practice. I promise you, the structured wisdom here is just fascinating, and we're going to make it all click.
Okay, let's dive into this. When you hear the words food or nourishment, you're probably picturing, breakfast, a good lunch, maybe dinner. But this ancient text, it asks us to look way deeper. Have you ever wondered what invisible forces are secretly feeding your daily stress or your anxiety? Or that awful feeling of just being stuck in a rut? What if the things we're constantly consuming with our minds are actually the exact things keeping us tethered to a cycle of dissatisfaction?
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The root of samsara. 2. Parsing the four nutriments. 3. Food and afflictions. 4. The practice of right observation. And finally, 5. Attaining true liberation. We're going to demystify this step by step.
All right, let's start with section 1, the root of samsara, understanding the cycle of endless suffering.
The text lays out this really wild core thesis. We're trapped in this continuous cycle of mental distress and rebirth, which is called samsara, mostly because we are constantly feeding our existence without even realizing it. It's not just about the meals on our plates. There are these invisible mental and karmic foods that we blindly consume every single day. And this unconscious consumption, it's literally the hidden engine driving all of our attachments and our suffering. Which brings us to section 2, parsing the four nutriments, the four ways we feed our existence.
Let's see how this builds, layer by layer. The text identifies 4 specific types of foods. First up is edible food. That's the obvious one, right? The physical stuff that keeps the body going. Second is contact. This means sensory input, everything we see, hear, or feel. Third is mental volition, which is the deeper intentions and desires of the mind. And fourth is consciousness itself, the overarching awareness that clings to our very existence. Notice how we're moving from the obvious physical stuff right down into the most microscopic, subtle layers of the mind.
To really demystify those last 2 complex terms for anyone new to this, think of it kind of like this. Mental volition is basically your obsessive focus on desires. Like when you're doom scrolling on your phone for 3 hours or endlessly agonizing over a future goal or some past regret, your mind is actively eating that experience. You're feeding your mental volition. And consciousness, that's the clinging awareness holding the whole shebang together. It's that deep-seated, desperate grip we have on simply existing and experiencing. Now for section 3, food and afflictions, the hidden trap of our daily consumption. This is where things get a little tricky, but absolutely crucial. And this brilliantly illustrates the central problem. The text warns us that blindly consuming these 4 nutriments is actually incredibly dangerous to our inner peace. Why? Because while they give us temporary satisfaction, a quick hit of joy or a fleeting moment of relief, they inevitably breed endless afflictions. We eat, we feel good for a second, and then bam, we immediately want more. This constant loop of craving creates a really profound inner restlessness. It maps out perfectly. These nutriments generate joy and worldly pleasure, which, hey, sounds great at first. But that joy quickly mutates into deep greed and attachment. We become terrified of losing what we have or just desperate to get what we don't. And that greed acts as the actual, literal fuel for the engine of cyclic existence. It drives us relentlessly forward through anxiety, ultimately embedding deep suffering right into our consciousness. We are, quite literally, feeding our own misery. So how on earth do we stop? That is section 4, the practice of right observation, the ultimate solution to break the cycle. To cure this, the text provides some incredibly visceral metaphors. I'm going to go through these steadily because they're meant to completely shock the mind out of its complacency. The first one addresses physical food. It says, "A bhikshu should observe edible food as the flesh of their own child, not to be coveted." Wow, I know, it is a shocking metaphor, but the goal isn't to gross you out. It's to starkly illustrate how we should view our gluttonous attachments. By viewing physical food this way, as something you'd only ever consume in the absolute most dire life-or-death survival scenario, it actually cures our deep-seated inner illness of overindulgence. Now, what's really interesting is how it tackles the second food, contact, or sensory input. It says, observe the 6 bases of contact like a flayed cow attacked by insects. Just imagine an animal without the protection of its skin, totally vulnerable to stinging bugs. This visualizes our painful, desperate seeking for worldly stimulation. Every single time we mindlessly hunt for a distraction, a sound, a screen, a sight, we're basically letting those insects bite at our unprotected mind. Observing this cures our endless seeking. For the third food, mental volition, the text states, observe contaminated mental volition as a pit of fire. All those burning desires, our non-stop mental planning, the endless wanting, it is not some cozy little campfire. It's a terrifying pit of fire that's only going to burn us. Viewing it this way cures the agonizing suffering of unfulfilled wants. When you finally see the fire for what it really is, you naturally stop trying to grab it. Finally, for consciousness itself, observe consciousness as being pierced by 300 spears. This is the heavy culmination of these metaphors, clinging to our very consciousness, our ego, our sense of I. It is an agonizing suffering. It's like being repeatedly pierced by spears. It's a heavy image for sure, but it's designed to completely jolt the beginner into realizing just how deeply our attachment to self is harming us. To summarize this path cleanly, we've got our 4 nutriments: edible, contact, volition, and consciousness. Against them, we apply our stark right observation metaphors: the child's flesh, the flayed cow, the pit of fire, and the 300 spears. And we see exactly what each one cures: inner illness, desire, unfulfilled wants, and all afflicted states. It's like a giant puzzle perfectly fitting together, an incredibly precise, ancient framework for diagnosing and curing very specific mental distresses. And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Attaining True Liberation, the piece of stopping the feed. We can leave those sobering metaphors behind now and look at the ultimate goal.
So the crucial point is this. The text promises that when our attachment is finally extinguished through this right observation, the nutriments themselves are extinguished. We stop unconsciously feeding our anxiety. We break the cycle. And that leads directly to the ultimate tranquility of nirvana. By consciously choosing not to blindly gobble up sensory and mental inputs, we stop that agonizing wheel of existence dead in its tracks and find profound, lasting inner peace.
It's a real game changer of a framework once you grasp it. You are actually in control of the diet of your mind. So knowing this ancient wisdom, what invisible foods will you choose to feed your mind tomorrow? Will you keep tossing logs onto the fire of mental volition? Or will you practice right observation and finally find peace? Take that question with you today. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep learning, keep observing, and keep breaking the cycle.